Karissa Lewis is with us. She said the people don't need to be listening to politicians. The politicians need to be listening to the people. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's trial for murder, the murder of George Floyd, was supposed to have begun yesterday. There have been some delays, and for this just brutal 8 minutes and 46 seconds that we all watched with horror when the video came out. And so I wanted to get some real up-to-date information. What's going on with this? Karissa Lewis is on the line with us. Karissa is the National Field Director for the Movement for Black Lives. Their website is m4bl.org, m4bl.org, and the Twitter handle is mvmnt4blk lives. And Karissa, welcome to the program. And what's the latest? What's the holdup, and what's the latest news coming out of this trial of this apparently killer police officer?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you. I think the holdup is connected to the process around jury selection, but I'm not fully clear. And, the Movement for Black Lives is an ecosystem made up of over 100 Black-led organizations across the country, including Black Visions Collective that is in Minneapolis. And so as a group that's holding space for local organizations, we're really leaning on our local folks to point us in the direction in terms of how folks respond to this moment.
Right. So, I understand that there's the possibility of adding a third-degree murder charge to his charges, and that was part of what slowed it down, and also, this debate over jury selection. Do you think that that's because they want the jury to have a lesser fallback charge if they can't find him guilty of the most serious charge?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. What I do know is that historically, the same system that is creating the conditions where police officers kill Black people with impunity is the same system that folks are now relying on to provide justice in this moment. And so, I think it's a challenging situation for Black folks to be in, to continue to try and seek support and reprieve in a system that just has consistently caused harm in and of itself.
You mentioned, we're talking with Karissa Lewis, the National Field Director for the Movement for Black Lives. You mentioned that you're coordinating the various organizations with regard to a response to this trial and the broader response to police violence in general. I mean, we saw the murder of George Floyd kick off the largest social justice movement in terms of people in the streets and sustained activity in the history of America. What is your organization's advice, or what are you seeing happening, or what do you think is the best or the least effective ways to message this and to react to this, both by Black organizations, people who are directly affected by this, African Americans, and your allies?
So I know what is paramount for Black folks in this moment is to continue to be a soft landing place for folks who are, one, getting politicized in this moment, and two, suffering from the impacts of this moment. And so I know, for instance, folks in Minneapolis are going to be advancing a series around healing spaces and activities where some of the folks who are harmed by the events of last summer really have a space to come together and to be in community and love up on each other. And so, we're both trying to grapple with, what are the real impacts on our folks, and then what are the systemic changes we're trying to seek. And I think it's important to lift up that since May 2020, organizers in over 20 cities have generated hundreds of thousands of emails, testimonies, petition signatures. Folks have secured divestment of over $840 million from police departments, secured at least $160 million in investments in those same communities, and canceled contracts with police in schools, saving an additional $34 million. And so, we are going to continue to advance things like the BREATHE Act, which is, model legislation that seeks to do a few things. It seeks to divest federal resources from incarceration and policing and end criminal legal system harm, invest in new approaches to community safety, utilizing state incentives, allocate new money to build healthy and sustainable, equitable communities, and hold political leaders accountable and enhance self-determination for Black communities. So, you know, we have a long game, and we're going to continue to stay rooted in that long game of a complete reimagination of public safety. Because what we know is that the overwhelming majority of Black folks don't feel safe when they're, you know, in the presence of police. And so we have to reimagine that system and that institution completely.
Speaking of systemic changes, and specifically in policing and the criminal justice system, and I salute the great work that you all have done in trying to move, and in some cases successfully moving resources, you know, largely financial resources, out of policing and into servicing people and reducing the need for policing. But what are the systemic changes that are at the top of your list? You know, greater integration of police forces, reduction of the use of SWAT teams, no-knock warrants. I mean, there's this whole spectrum of stuff that I hear about constantly, that we talk about in this program. What do you prioritize? Where do you think we need to be looking and working toward?
So I think each community has identified different priorities for them. We try to create the BREATHE Act in a way that it holds space for all of the different nuances that exist inside of local communities. But I think broadly, folks are trying to shift the scale, size, and scope of policing. And so that looks like demilitarization. That looks like, ending cash money bail. So again, each community has started to think about, in their own context, what are the most elegant next steps in terms of defunding the police.
Yeah, and that phrase, defunding the police, has become highly politicized. Republicans used it in attack ads against Democrats, with some success, with some failures, in the last cycle, at least according to the press. Is there a discussion around changing that language, or on the other hand, embracing that language in a way that causes a larger number of people to understand what it actually means?
I think that this is an interesting debate that many folks have been inside of, and I know that folks have even said, oh, the slogan. We're pretty clear that it's not a slogan, but a demand. And that we actually don't, as social movements, have to move to the will of the elected officials. Like they actually have to do the work to understand the shifting in the electorate, and the electorate is shifting. Many of the even Democratic candidates who lost, it was because they did not pick up a progressive agenda. And then we have cases like Cori Bush in St. Louis, where folks are standing pretty firmly on the ideals that are coming out of social movements and are finding great success. So the invitation is for elected officials to really listen to their electorate. And their electorate, in many ways, is still calling for a defunding of the police.